We like to think we have reality neatly categorized. We know exactly how cells divide inside a petri dish, and we can track the expansion of galaxies billions of light years away. The map of the physical world feels complete. But then you encounter a scenario. A person walks down a hallway littered with chairs and boxes. They effortlessly step around every single obstacle. If you ask them how they did it, they'll tell you they have no idea. They are completely legally blind. Or consider Lydia Fairchild. She stood in a delivery room with a judge's official watching her give birth. Yet when the state tested the new baby's blood, the DNA results came back with an impossible conclusion. Lydia was not related to her own children. These are documented, peer-reviewed realities that shatter the boundaries of our most trusted scientific models. When the data openly defies the laws of physics and biology, we have to ask what happens when the map we've drawn is entirely wrong. In biology, there is a hard rule. If an organism is going to learn, remember, and solve complex problems, it requires a nervous system. You need neurons to think. Yet, Physarum polycephalum, a bright yellow, single-celled slime mold that lives on rotting logs, routinely solves complex spatial puzzles. If you place a piece of an oat at the end of a maze, this giant brainless cell will explore the paths and perfectly calculate the shortest possible route to the prize. This is a map of the Tokyo Metropolitan Railway System, one of the most intricately intersecting networks on Earth. When researchers placed oats on a map representing Tokyo's surrounding cities, the slime mold grew a web of tubes that almost perfectly replicated the transit system, a spatial calculation that took human engineers decades to solve. It can even anticipate the future. Researchers blasted a slime mold with cold, dry air for exactly 10 minutes every hour. Once they finally stopped, the slime mold still slowed its movements and braced itself precisely 1 hour later. It learned a time-based pattern, despite having 0 neurons to store a memory, a phenomenon scientists now call basal cognition. If a brainless blob can think, humans present the inverse glitch. Our conscious minds can be entirely blind, while our physical bodies perfectly perceive visual threats in the room around us. This happens because about 10% of the optic nerve fibers completely bypass a damaged primary visual cortex. Instead, they dive deep into the superior colliculus, a primitive, rapid response node. It doesn't paint a conscious picture. It simply calculates trajectories and threats, sending movement commands straight to the motor cortex. Perception isn't strictly a top-down command from a conscious mind. In both the slime mold and the human brain, observation and problem-solving exist as ghosts, operating entirely outside of our awareness. Our physical existence is bound by rigid limits. Your DNA acts as a singular, defining blueprint for your body, and when human cells are removed from that body, they eventually stop dividing and die, a hard boundary known as the Hayflick limit. Lydia Fairchild's impossible maternity test broke the first rule. Doctors eventually discovered she was a human chimera. As a microscopic cluster of cells in the womb, she absorbed her twin sister. Her skin and blood were built from one genetic blueprint, but her internal reproductive organs held the DNA of the ghost twin she absorbed before she was even born. The second rule was broken in 1951 by Henrietta Lacks. Doctors took a sample of her cancer cells, and instead of dying after a few days in a lab dish, they began copying themselves at an explosive speed, with no natural end to their life cycle.
A normal human cell has 46 distinct chromosomes, and gaining even one extra usually triggers an internal self-destruct mechanism. Henrietta's cells operate flawlessly with up to 80 massively scrambled, shattered, and glued together chromosomes. A cell with this much genetic damage should be completely non-functional, yet it orchestrates its own chaotic reproduction perfectly. While those cells refuse to die, other biological anomalies act as dead assassins. Prions contain absolutely 0 genetic material. They are just regular proteins in the brain that randomly fold into the wrong shape. When this microscopic zombie bumps into a healthy protein, it forces it to contort into the same twisted shape, creating a fatal spreading chain reaction without using a single living virus or bacteria. The fragility of the body goes both ways. In cases of psychogenic death, often called voodoo death, A massive psychological trauma can convince the brain's anterior cingulate circuit that a situation is entirely hopeless. The nervous system then actively shuts down a perfectly healthy body, dropping blood pressure and stopping the heart, despite there being no physical illness or injury. A single misfolded protein or a sharp psychological trauma can rewrite the definitions of life, death, and identity. When we zoom out from microscopic biology to the macrocosmos, the rules of physics dictate that the universe should be entirely random. On a grand enough scale, space is supposed to look and act uniformly in every direction. But out past Pluto, astronomers have noticed small, frozen rocks moving in a highly specific way. Instead of traveling in random directions, these distant objects are all being dragged into the exact same tilted orbit by an immense, invisible gravitational force. To find out what is pulling them, astronomers are using massive new tools like the Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile to scan the pitch-black void. The math suggests there is either an invisible planet 10 times the size of Earth out there, or a tiny, ancient black hole wandering through our solar system. This heat map shows the cosmic microwave background, the residual radiation left over from the Big Bang. According to our standard models, these microscopic fluctuations in temperature should be a completely random, messy scatter of hot and cold spots. But when researchers map this oldest light across the sky, they find that the hot and cold variations are perfectly aligned along a single colossal axis, stretching across the vastness of space. Astronomers refer to this anomaly as the axis of evil because of its terrifying implication. This massive cosmic line happens to point directly along the exact path that Earth and our solar system take as we move through the Milky Way galaxy. If the oldest light in existence aligns with our planet's specific trajectory, the mathematical assumption of a random universe loses its foundation. We don't have to look to the edge of the solar system to find impossibilities. Starting in 2016 at the U.S. Embassy in Cuba, hundreds of diplomats and intelligence officers began suffering from severe brain damage, dizziness, and memory loss, all triggered by invisible, untraceable stimuli now known as HENA syndrome. When confronted with data that breaks the rules, the scientific instinct is to protect the model. The widespread cases of HENA syndrome get chalked up to stress. The axis of evil is dismissed as mathematical masking from cosmic dust or a statistical fluke. These anomalies represent the specific data points that eventually require new formulas and updated laws. The most significant breakthroughs are often found in these impossible phenomena, waiting at the edge of our current maps.